Hello and welcome back to WonderTour, episode 130. We are wrapping up our discussion of the Queen's Gambit, the Netflix miniseries, and also wrapping up our series on trusting the process. In our first episode on the Queen's Gambit, we talked about our main character, Beth, about how her single-minded focus on becoming extraordinary at chess both allowed her to make her geographic world much bigger and to experience a great deal of success in the world, but the flip side of that was she managed to make her personal world quite small indeed and kind of keep everybody at arm's length and had not successfully figured out how to navigate balancing those attributes in her life. So in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about that challenge and about what examples she might be able to find in her world of how to navigate that. But just see where we start with her in the middle of this series. She is young, she's beautiful, she's relatively wealthy, she's got her own house, she's successful in the world, she's out there playing chess tournaments, she's winning a lot, but she doesn't win all the time. In particular, there's the one mountain she can't climb, the lead Russian world number one, Mr. Borgov, and he beats her a couple times in a row, and it just destroys her. Like, she just falls apart afterwards because her whole worldview is organized around being the best at chess, and she doesn't really have a mechanism to do anything else. And so not winning is pretty hard for her to take. So, Drew, that's my question for you this episode. How do you learn to love losing?
So much fun, truly, because I think this is a lesson that literally each one of us has to learn. And if you're thinking about it now and you're feeling like you haven't learned it yet, then maybe this episode is for you. Because I think I had in my life definitely times where I just wouldn't even, I didn't want to engage. I didn't want to play games because I knew I wasn't good at them. I didn't want to do a thing because I just felt like if I did, then I was just going to see how bad I was at it, and other people might see how bad I was at it. And I needed to keep up this pristine image with everybody that, I'm just so skilled and so good at things. And I think there's different reasons that Beth has this. There's different reasons that you, the listener, might have this, but we all struggle with this. We all want to win. And so I want to bring in this quote from Bruce Lee here. Like everyone else, you want to learn the way to win, but never to accept the way to lose. To accept defeat, to learn to die, is to be liberated from it. So when tomorrow comes, you must free your ambitious mind and learn the art of dying. And that's heavy. That's definitely a heavy quote right there. And it's paraphrasing Seneca, and it's got some other paraphrases, I'm sure, philosophers of ancient times.
Yes, no, I'm on board with the free your ambitious mind part, but talk to me about learning the art of dying, Drew. I don't think I'm there yet. What are you thinking? So what does this say to you?
This is so wonderful because it's all about being able to accept, first and foremost, losing for what it is, which is an opportunity to learn. That's the first thing, I think. And I think that's the primary lesson that we see Beth learn here. She learns that losing isn't just about losing, it's about growing, and that you can grow more when you lose, to Borgov, for example, than you can when you win. And it's easier if you embrace losing than it is if you fight back against it and send yourself into a death spiral where you're drinking yourself into missing your press appointments and stuff like that. So there's one element there to it. But I want to bring in a quick story, and I'm not going to tell the full story, but you could probably Google it and find it. This is a story of Tyler Staton that he gave on a recent sermon that he gave, but great story where every quarter he does this contemplative practice of going off and going into silence and solitude and learning and journaling and reading and doing all this kind of weekend exercise. When he came back, he felt like, you know what? Like, I think there's a blessing on the horizon. I think something good is going to happen. I think there's going to be happiness and joy that's kind of unexpectedly dropped on me. And what he was very quickly met with was a text message from somebody that he loved dearly, a great friend, that said, hey, we need to talk about something. Let's meet up on Friday. And what he could immediately tell was that, this doesn't sound
this doesn't feel like a blessing.
Yeah, this doesn't feel like a blessing. This feels like there's about to be a gap identified in my life that I didn't previously know about, potentially, that I'm going to be asked to improve. And sure enough, when Friday rolls around, he gets to the meeting, and anybody's going to be apprehensive going into a meeting like that, but it's with somebody that you love and you've known for a while. So you go into it. And Of course, yes, it is a thing that has been identified, an opportunity for Tyler to improve. And it's painful, right? Anytime somebody identifies an opportunity where we're not living our life in accordance with the mission, the vision that we have, and as a result, I don't know what the specific example that he had was, but as a result, guess what we're probably doing? We're probably damaging the people around us in a certain way. And so you can look at that and you can see that moment and you can say, well, where's the blessing? Or you can look at that like Tyler did and say, this losing, that's the blessing. That was what I was looking forward to, was recognizing that each gap that somebody identifies, it's an opportunity. And instead of running away from it, instead of drowning myself, when somebody comes in and criticizes me, instead to relish it, say, thank you. This is an opportunity to grow. You've just shown me, you've made me aware of the difference between who I'd like to be and who I currently am.
And that makes sense to me, right? Because my answer to the question of how do you learn to love losing is still, I don't want to. Like, I'm not going to love losing, right? But I can imagine loving learning more. I can imagine accepting losing because I can look for like this next time I'm going to get it right. Oh, next time I'm going to be a lot wiser. I'm going to be less clumsy. I'm going to be more insightful or something. I love those moments. Love the moment after the, oh my God, I was so incredibly unskillful. I was incredibly clumsy. I was incredibly harsh, right? I don't like those moments, but the moment afterwards of when you see it coming and you're like, oh, this would be better. I could do this. Those are great. So maybe that's as close as I'm going to get to loving losing, is being excited about the potential learnings on the other side of my unskillfulness.
I love that example, Brian. I mean, that's realistic, and that's where most of us are at. We're still attached to the incentive on the other side, which is learning. I don't know that we have time to go into it today, but I think there's a whole lot more to this Bruce Lee quote. If you just look at the second half, so when tomorrow comes, you must free your ambitious mind and learn the art of dying, because the art of dying is not about learning. Definitely not all about learning. It's about submission. It's about self-sacrifice and service and recognition that it's not about you.
Not about you. I feel like I've heard that quote before on WonderTour. All right, well, we're going to get back to the Queen's Gambit and Beth's journey to wisdom, but first, let's do the intro. Hi, I'm Brian Nutwell.
And I'm Drew Perot.
And we are on a journey to lead wisely, to become better leaders by touring fantastic worlds and inspiring lore by going on this WonderTour.
We connect leadership concepts to story context because it sticks to our brains better. You can find out more at WonderTourPodcast.com or by searching on YouTube, Lead Wisely.
Also, if you visit WonderTourPodcast.com, you can find our fabulous merch, and you too could be walking the streets in the WonderTour logo. All right, so back to our friend Beth. So Beth is, as of the middle of this series, she is highly skilled at winning. She's highly skilled at chess. She is maybe highly skilled at drinking, and aside from that, has very little to offer the world. She figured out her fashion sense, but she is very, very bad at losing. And dealing with the aftermath of losing, because as we talked about, she has isolated herself so thoroughly. I think this is really the punchline for me, right? She's done such a thorough job of isolating yourself. She made it all about her. It was all about Beth, right? She made it all about her, which meant that it wasn't about anybody else, which meant that nobody else is around. So when you fail, it's all about you. There's nobody else to blame. There's nobody else's fault that it can be. There's nobody to tell you what you could have done better or that it's going to be okay tomorrow. Like, it's just you.
Mm-hmm.
And that, we've been there, that is deeply lonely. That's really hard to process.
Yeah, failing into loneliness that's really tough. That's where it's hard to resonate with this idea that we should embrace losing, embrace death. It's tough because you're like, well, there's nothing here, but the opportunity then is, okay, well, what if there's others to share it with? Because when you're relishing in your losses, or becoming the type of person who can relish in their losses, I think we're developing a new angle on what we talk about here on WonderTour, which is the magnanimous leader. The magnanimous leader loves losing because it's an opportunity, right? We love winning, but we love losing equally because it's an opportunity to grow, but not just to grow so that we can say that we're the best, but to grow so that we can serve others in a more meaningful way so that we can close the gap between who we thought we were and who we actually are. And in doing so, become less damaging to the people around us. Because let's be honest, if we all look at it, there's times, in fact, as I've been learning this lesson that the Queen's Gambit has been teaching me, there's just absolute pure joy in the moments. You might cry, you might be broken when you realize there's a gap between who I am and who I thought I was. And as a result, I am not properly treating the people around me. But once you have that awareness, that's the first step to being able to make a change. And that's the joy.
Yeah. So I'd like to look at some examples, because we have characters in this series around Beth who have clearly internalized this, right? She starts learning to play chess from the janitor in the basement at her orphanage, Mr. Scheidel, and he doesn't talk much. He mostly just sets her chess problems, and he's kind of gruff, but he's kind of setting up for success. She learns how to play, and then in like 3 weeks, she's just beating him consistently at chess. And he's not all bent out of shape about it. He's not like throwing the chessboard away and kicking her out of the basement, never talking to her again. He has this genuine sense of joy. It's like, I just found this 9-year-old girl who's really good at this, and this is kind of amazing to watch. I'm going to tell my chess friends, and I'm going to encourage her, and I'm going to give her some books and some challenges and kind of coach her. Like, he leans into the fact that he's found somebody that can exceed him, right? When she beats Harry Beltic in the Kentucky State Championship the first time, he's not happy about it, but he circles back to her. He admires her. He's actually really excited about this new person in his orbit that can share chess with him the way that he is, as much as he loves chess, more than he loves chess, right? But he wants to share it with her. She has the same thing like these other chess players. As she works her way up and starts beating them, a lot of them are like, wow, nobody's ever done that. You really love this as much as I love this. Let's hang out. Let's go play speed chess. Let's talk about things. Let's do things together, right? She keeps encountering people that can share joy even when they're losing. And she doesn't learn that lesson at all. She's just checking them off one by one. Okay, I got past that hurdle. Okay, nope, I don't have to worry about Harry anymore. Okay, I got past Benny. Okay, now Borgov's the next one. I got to get him. Like, she's just working her way up the chain, but she's never noticing this lesson. She's never noticing this opportunity. But there's a limit to that. If you are extraordinarily focused and extraordinarily talented, you can become among the very best in the world at something. You can become among the best in your environment. But what we see here, I think, in our Mountaintop Moment, is that Beth starts to realize she goes up against Borgov a couple times and loses to him. And she's starting to realize that she's not going to get past it, that her success is too brittle. Her technique is not flexible enough. Her approach to thinking about chess, and more broadly to thinking about being a professional, is not robust enough to handle his level of maturity. But
that's all subconscious. That's the thing. I think we're starting to see, like, us as the audience is experiencing that. And we're realizing over the course of the middle and later episodes of the series, yeah, maybe she isn't going to be able to beat Borgov. Maybe this does end in a tragedy because she's not doing the things that are required to learn from the losses that she's taking. She's static at that point. It doesn't seem like she's going to until we get to season.
Yeah, she's going harder and harder and harder into the drinking, into the jet setting, into the isolationism, into the me. It's all about Beth. But then when you lose that confidence, when it's like, well, I'm not sure all about Beth is enough to beat Borgov, like, I'm not sure that'll work. Then what do you do? Because you got nothing else. You got nobody to rely on. You got, your intuition and your brilliance and your medication is what's got you to this point.
At least that's what she thinks has gotten her to this point. And it's a limiting belief that she has about herself. And this is, just pause for a minute and humor us on just how great of a story is told here, right? And the way that the story is told through the scenes and the order in which they're delivered and the symbolism and the connection between the scenes. It's amazing, right? Because if you're to summarize everything in the Queen's Gambit, and it's a lot, it's complicated, but if you're to just summarize it all, basically, the whole story is about Beth's resolution to her trauma, and by resolving her trauma, becoming free from these constraints that she's had on herself. It's only a little bit of pieces of it that we get to see up until the last episode. And then the last episode, it's an outward expression of this limit break that Beth is going through, where she finally has the recognition. And this isn't our Mountaintop Moment, but there's multiple things that lead up to this, right? It's her going down into the janitor's closet at the old orphanage and realizing that despite the fact that she never even paid back Mr. Scheidel's $5 or $10 that she owed him. He continued to root her on, despite that she never came back to see him again. He always believed in her. He cared. And I think she realizes in that moment what relationships are actually about. And that it's not about going it alone. And that's compounded by her seeing Jolene and seeing how Jolene has matured in her life and developed and not just become all about herself, but become about making a change in the world, right? And she sees the similar thing happening even with these previous chess master love interest things that she has going on, right? Where like they're also willing to grow and adapt. And it all builds us up to our mountaintop moment here, where she has a choice of how she's going to proceed forward. Is she going to learn and grow, or is she going to continue to make the same mistakes and lose to Borgov?
And she works her way through this chess tournament in Moscow. She's beating successively more impressive Russian chess grandmasters. She beats the grizzled, white-haired veteran chess grandmaster who, again, demonstrates to her, he shakes her hand and says, "This was a real honor. You're the best chess player I've ever seen." Which, coming from a Russian grandmaster in the 60s is a pretty strong statement. Like, he's got joy in that moment. He's not like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I lost to this girl." He's like, "Wow, that was amazing. I just got to watch genius in action." She sees these things. They're not quite penetrating. She's got the Jolene example. She's got the Mr. Scheidel example. She's got the chess players example. She's in the middle of this match with Borgov, and they're 40 moves in, and they're both going strong. And she's like, "I'm not sure this is going to work. I've never beat him before." She's got a lot of anxiety about this. They adjourn for the night. And as she's wandering the halls of the hotel or wherever the facility where they've got this, she sees the Russians, Borgov and 3 or 4 of his compatriots in a side room, and they're sharing some drinks, and they're gathered over a chess table, and they're all talking strategy. They're basically talking about how to beat her. And she gets a little window into this room, and as an audience, we're watching that as like, oh, is she going to try to steal their strategy? Is she jealous? Is she lonely? Is she going to go want to be friends? She just they close the door and she walks away. But she sees that. And I think what happens is that she realizes that she's not just playing Borgov. It finally occurs to her that the thing that he has that she doesn't have is not special brilliance. He's clearly equally brilliant to anybody in the world at playing chess. Like, he's the world number 1 and he's in his 40s or something, which is quite rare. And they make a point of this. But the thing that he has that she does not have is he has community. He has friends that he trusts. And when you get to that level, when you get to that, I want to be the best in the world at something, the best one brain in the world is never going to be better than the best other 5 brains in the world, right? The people that you trust that will help you, even when it doesn't benefit them, even when it's just because they want you to succeed. She's trying to climb that mountain all by herself. And the thing that he has learned, the thing that this Borgov character has learned, is to not do it by himself. Is to take the weight on as the champion, as the world number 1, as the person sitting across the chessboard, but to be willing to accept relationships with other people and help them and be part of the community and be helped in return.
Yeah, she, as I'm realizing it right now, she's learning what Ricky Bobby learns.
Which is always the lesson that the hero have to learn in these movies.
Exactly, right? It's always the lesson the hero has to learn. It's not about you. She's learning that if this whole thing is for you to summit the mountain by yourself and plant a flag and show the world that you're the greatest, maybe you can do that, maybe you can't. But when you do it, what will you become? And we see this contrast in between how she acts before this moment and how she acts after, where now after we get, assumedly Harry is getting these people together in the United States, and they're going to provide her advice based on the information that they've gotten about the adjournment, about the current position of the game from the first day going into the second day. And previously, right, Beth she always stiff arms these guys. They're always trying to help her, and she's like, no, yeah, maybe I'll play against you, but I'm going to learn what I want to learn.
Let me just show you how I'm better than you. And then, she's very resistant to support. And so they're on this incredibly expensive, international telephone call with like 6 people in New York. And they're all scheming different ways to approach the current position on the board and what the strategies are and what Borgov's probably going to do and what the other Russians are going to tell him to do. And she gets this vast menu of options that she doesn't have to come up with herself. And at the same time, her former sort of love interest, Towns, comes back into town. He comes into Moscow to cover the tournament for his hometown paper, and he's become a journalist now. And so she sort of lets him into her orbit. she's getting increasingly these adoring crowds outside the competition every day in Moscow. There's like 3 people the first day, and by the last day, when they adjourn with her journey to Borgov, it's just like a mob scene, and people are following her moves outside, and they're asking for signatures and showing the babies. She's getting this crowd around her, and like you say, she's finally starting to let them in.
Yeah,
and so
she's
she lets
able
her,
to learn. She's able
yeah,
to process because she's finally, after she processes her initial trauma of the scene that happens with her mother at the beginning of the movie, the realization that it happened on purpose, the car crash, and she has to go through and understand what that means for her and how she's going to go forward. Is she going to become like her mother, or like Alma, or is she going to overcome that? She gets off the alcohol and the drugs. She's able to see clearly for a moment. Like you said, she lets Towns in. Because Towns comes in, and Towns is, he's meant to be this kind of like amazing character, right? But he is, because he comes in and he doesn't play to all the tropes that she always falls back into. He comes in the same spot that Cleo comes in Paris, but this time, he's just there to help. He's like, I'm not trying to use you for anything. I'm not trying to get anything out of you. I'm not trying to use you to help me overcome my own trauma. I'm just here to help you. And I think she sees that, and that opens the door. And then finally, it leads us up to the amazing moment that we have at the end, where she's able to have this realization that her ability to see that chessboard on the ceiling didn't have anything to do with the drugs that she was taking in the first place. That was a self-limiting belief, that her ability was not better when she was on the drugs, but that was her innate ability to play chess the entire time, and that she had been holding on to this belief that this was the only way for her to harness it, but she had to let go, right? She had to be willing to lose and be willing to learn. And finally, as we close out this mountaintop moment, I think what's important is at the end, when she finally overcomes Borgov, yes, there's this internal win. Yes, it's a team win for everybody that helped Beth. But what about how Borgov responds to it? You see at first there's this sadness, and he does a good job of, in the Russian way, showing his facial expression here, but then afterwards it gives way when he resigns to a smile, and he hugs Beth. This is the world number one, the guy who hates to lose. But he's learned that losing, it's okay sometimes. He has to grow, he has to learn, and really it's not all about him. Somehow he learned that lesson, and we were privy to it because of the mountaintop moment where he's in this room. He's helping the other guys. He's listening to them. He doesn't see this as him winning when he wins. He sees it as us winning when Borgov wins.
And she's had that example in front of her for years now and not taking the right lessons from it. But he shows the same joy in that moment of like, wow, that was an amazing match. And I saw something that I'd never seen before. And I'm really proud to have this new colleague. And this was so cool. He's able to process that and get some joy from it. And I think as the audience, like, we've enjoyed watching her, beat up on older dudes in chess the entire series. Like, that's part of the joy of this series, is just watching this thing happen. But also, to some extent, this almost feels like the first win that she really earned. This is the payoff of, she figured out what this is all for. She's got all the Americans behind her. She's got all the Russians behind her. She's got the chess players behind her. She's got Jolene behind her. She's got all these people that were like on her side. And she finally figured out that she wasn't just playing for herself, that she was playing for all those people. In the way that, Hollywood does, that unlocks her success. She rises to the top of the mountain. She's now the world number one, who's defeated the best, the chess player in the world. So then take us to our closing scene, because I think this is really the most powerful. This is just the perfect way to cap this thing off.
Yeah. So much good closure in this final episode, but nothing is better than the closing scene, because I don't think that you could argue that Beth is a leader at all up until this point. In all of the minutes of watch time, Beth doesn't do one thing that would lead you to believe that she's a leader up until the last moment. And so the final closing scene is when she's driving in the car away from the win that she gets against Borgov, and she asks to get out, and she's walking down the street in the park, and she walks off towards this group of older folks, these Russian people. They're not wearing nice clothes. They're not highly regarded by society. They're just lovers of chess. She walks in, and she's immediately celebrated. And you can see that it's genuine joy in the community. She has joy. They have joy. Even though she just beat Their Russian champion Borgov, they celebrate her because she's a great chess player. And what does she do? She walks over and finds an old man and sits down across the table from him. And this is the first time where you really see Beth start to smile because she's free. It's no longer all about, I have to beat everybody. I have to prove myself to everybody. She sees herself as a part of a group of people that are passionate about something. In fact, she might even be capable of being a leader of that group of people that are passionate about something, which means it's not about going back and taking the interviews and being in the magazines. It's about finding the people that are passionate about it and serving them. And that's really what she does. This is the first selfless act in the entire show for her.
Yes, she is finally part of a community. Having benefited from a community the entire series, she's finally engaged with being part of the community and giving back to it, even if it's just by sitting down in the park and sharing joy of chess, right? So, yeah, you're right. This is the first thing that she does in the entire series that isn't all about her. And somehow we've been rooting for her the whole time, which is a really impressive job of just crafting this whole narrative that we kind of wanted her to succeed, even though she's kind of being a terrible human being. But I think that goes back to what we talked about in the first episode, right? The lessons of how people are going to regard you are two things, right? You get credit for being good at something, even if it's not their thing. You get credit for providing value in the world and being really great at something and committed to something. But you also, they will judge with you and relate with you based on how you interact with them. And it's not until this moment where she starts to even recognize the second one of those, right? Where she's like, okay, I can let all that it's all about me stuff go long enough to just like enjoy something with other people when I'm not going to get anything out of it. Every other time she plays chess, every single other chess match that we watch her play in this entire series is because she wants to win to get to the next level. She wants to prove that she's good to successive levels of people, right? And this is the first time that she's probably playing just for fun. Even when she's having fun hanging out with Benny and all of his friends in New York and whatever, and they're playing speed chess, she's winning money. She's either winning or losing the entire time, and it's for something, proving how great she is. And this is the final, like, I have nothing to prove moment. And so you're right. She is not yet a leader in what we consider to be a magnanimous leader in the WonderTour sense. But she has opened the door to having those skills. She's opened the door to people relating with her in a way that they might actually follow.
Yeah, and I think that example, it comes from Mr. Scheidel. It comes from Jolene. It comes from, even in fractions, people like Harry, who she sees and she's like, oh, that's what it's actually about. It was never about being just the best in the world. It was about using that to do something, using that to help people. And I don't know where this goes, right? Because this is a miniseries. We never get anything else. But you imagine that this can be the beginning of Beth not just being a hero, but being a leader as well.
Being a key force. Maybe the American chess players form this sort of collaborative network as the Russians already have and build themselves up to be a world power rather than individually trying to outshine each other. Yeah.
Maybe Beth just sits down and, as the conquering hero of the world, plays a game with the orphan, with the person who has no business sitting and playing with Beth technically, if all she cares about is Elo.
Right.
But in that moment, that's Beth developing the leadership superpower of compassion.
Yeah.
And understanding that just to be with somebody where they're currently at, serve them in a small way with no expectation of anything in return, that changes the world.
Well, I think that's the right place to leave this one. That was a lot of fun. We got some cool stuff out of this series, and I definitely am motivated to go play some more chess. All right, so that's all for this episode. Thank you for joining us on our continuing journey to become better leaders, to lead wisely. In our next episode, we're going to start a new series related to trust the process. We're going to start talking about game theory. We're going to talk about taking maybe an analytical approach to the world and to the many possibilities that it holds. So we're going to dive into a deeply analytical and serious movie as our first one. I think Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning is our choice on deck. Maybe it won't be that serious. Maybe it won't be that analytical. But there will be explosions and Tom Cruise performing his own stunts. We'll hope you join us for that one. In the meantime, just remember, as always, character is destiny. And I'm going to add our second tagline: but character can be cultivated.